Okie dokie. So, right. Hello and welcome. I'm Sharon Ann Lovegrove. I'm a quantum systems analyst and a mental fitness coach. And I help women suffering with imposter syndrome who self-sabotage, procrastinate, and sophisticatedly hide because they're afraid they'll be found out that they're not perfect. So their persona is the superwoman who is trying to do everything themselves. And so what they do is micromanage, overgive, don't say no, worry what others think, put pressure on themselves to be perfect, and then end up stressed, overwhelmed, and depleted. Basically, they're on the hamster wheel and they're going around and around and around. So with my help, they get to develop the mental fitness to confidently take control of their life, tame their inner critic, and create a new future that is healthier, happier, wealthier, and more fun. So, yeah, if that's something that you're curious about, well, pop that in the chat and we can have a little chat. All right, so today the talk is all about digging deeply and truly appreciating your prosperous life. So many of you will know that recently I did a tandem parachute jump. And some of you may have read my post about how imposter syndrome played its part in my celebrating that. So what happened, and this was really something that's quite classic for the superwoman and the woman that does everything, is that very often when they want to celebrate things, there's this kind of disconnect. So for what happened for me was people told me that jumping out of the plane was courageous and brave. But you know something? I didn't feel that. I didn't feel courageous. I didn't feel brave. In fact, I just kind of disconnected and I dismissed it. I dismissed the enormity of jumping out of a plane, which my partner wouldn't even dare do ever. I didn't feel brave and I didn't feel courageous because for me, it was easy. It was easy. And I knew that there was no way that I was never going to jump. I was going to jump. I wasn't anxious at all. And when I say I wasn't anxious, I had been concerned that I might disconnect from the person that I was in tandem with. But once I was all stitched up and attached, I let go of that. I didn't think about that. And I was able to just let go because somebody else was taking charge and someone that was an expert in their job. So I didn't worry about that. I didn't have the butterflies. It was fun, but it was also a bit of matter of fact, really. But the thing was, I didn't value that actually it was something that is kind of defies a little bit of the norm, you know. It is, you know, anything could go wrong. Not really, you know, we are able to take more precautions these days, but you know, things can go wrong and you could land up dead. But that just wasn't even part of my repertoire. And so for me, you know, it just felt as though I didn't have courage. How could it be courageous, right? It just wasn't hard. But this is it. This is the belief. This is the belief that it was hard for me to believe that I had courage and that I didn't experience fear. How can I not have courage if I didn't experience fear? Can you do that? I mean, I'd love to know your thoughts there. Can you experience courage without fear? Yeah. Or does it necessarily mean you have to have fear to be courageous? Well, I don't know. But this is the belief. This is the belief that you can't have courage and not experience fear. Those two just kind of don't go together. And I had to sit for a while and think in that and really appreciate that. And really sit there and know that it does not mean that not having fear doesn't mean that I am not brave. But this is what we do in imposter syndrome, okay? And this is what I have to notice, because in imposter syndrome, very often the superwoman is a hyperachiever, right? Now, hyperachiever tells herself the lies that she's not good enough. She has to do more and more and more and more and more in order to prove that she's good enough. Yeah. And what often the hyperachiever can't do is look and see their gifts as the gifts they've been given, because that may be because they just naturally have that kind of brain or that kind of ability, and they can hold that kind of fear. And that doesn't mean they're not brave, but it also means that what often happens is they take bigger and bigger risks and take on more and more and more and more until they can't sustain it anymore. And that's the lie. That is the lie of the superachiever. That's the lie of the superwoman. And that's the lie of what goes on. So for me, it was really important, excuse me, my eyes just a little itchy, really important to notice that. Because before in previous times, I wouldn't have noticed that. But this time I did. And I started to do a little bit of work on that and actually shared with other people about what was going on for me. Because one of the things is with the superwomen is they often become very alone, because they're often trying to show that they are okay, that they don't ask for help. So you don't get your needs met in some ways. So how does this apply to having a prosperous life? You might think, what's she talking about? But how does it apply to having a prosperous life? I'd love you to put that in the chat if you can let me know what you think. How might you make that connection between those dots? Might be in the title that I gave myself of what I do, but for me, it is all about mental fitness and our relationship to the law of infinite supply and our ability to receive it. Okay. The amount of energy that we have to supply, or the amount of universal energy that we have access to, and the amount of capacitance that we have to receive it. I'm going to explain a little bit about that, what I mean by that right now. So what do I mean by it? Well, bear with me. I want you to think about it in a slightly different way, and then I want you to kind of map it across. So when I used to work in intensive care, of course, in intensive care, we went through a lot. And while I was training, certainly, we used to go through a lot of different intensive cares. And one of the intensive cares that, well, certainly when I worked in respiratory for most of the time, we always had to work with oxygen, and we always had to work with the heart and work with blood supply. So part of this was really in certainly looking after cardiac patients. We were looking for the key principles of how to manage cardiac oxygen demand. So the demand for the heart to be able to receive oxygen, how much does it need? How much does it need to do the work that it needs to do versus the supply? So how much power is the demand? How much power did the oxygen, how much oxygen power was possible, and the supply too, so that that muscle could have the energy. So if a heart muscle has been damaged, it means that it is kind of weak, yeah? And that would mean, if you think stretching, now the heart is essentially like an elastic band, right? It follows a particular rule called, I'm going off piece of my notes here, but it follows the rule of Frank Starling's law, which talks about like an elastic, the more you pull on the elastic, so the more you stretch the muscle, because the muscle is elastic to some degree, the more you stretch it, the greater the recoil. Okay. But after a period of time, if you had to pull an elastic band even further beyond its capacity, what will happen is that it kind of breaks. It kind of breaks. And it doesn't break, but what it does is it becomes flaccid. All right. So in a sense, when you have cardiac muscle, it's been damaged. But it means also that its ability to stretch and its ability to recoil also is impeded. So it means that it is going to struggle to get oxygen out. So in normal times, we have something called afterload. And the afterload is the amount of blood that sits in the full aorta. Now, the aorta is a very, very, very thick muscle. It's the thickest muscle, and it's strong because it's got a pump. It's got to be able to expand and contract and expand and contract in order to deal with how the heart pumps out, because the heart, when it pumps out quite a lot of volume at any one time. So if you've got a weaker heart, you're not going to be able to pump enough power to get over the resistance. And this is really key, because we have to then manage how to deal with that resistance. And we can work on many different areas. We can work on the resistance. We can work on strengthening the heart. We can work on how much volume we put in the heart so that it doesn't have to work so hard. So we've got a couple of points of call where we can actually work on it, but we're working on the structure of how things go. And the same thing is what happens in the brain. In a way, even though your brain doesn't have the same kind of muscle, it works like a muscle because it needs power. It uses its power through electricity, and it uses its power by joining together so that we can create pathways. We can create pathways so that things can move very swiftly, very quickly, very easily, flow and grace. Now, most of us, as we grow up, we learn patterns, we learn what we call schemas. So we have a memory that has all sorts of things connected in it. We'll have feelings and thoughts and all sorts of things in like a little bubble. And those are called schemas. So we will run a set of schemas. How do I make a cup of tea? Well, there's all sorts of things that I would do. That's a schema. It's a whole story. It's a script for things. And we run these scripts automatically. But what happens when we go through troubling times, when we experience moments of lack or moments where we move into a kind of stressful state, or we kind of move into an environment that's not very helpful, or particularly it's very stressful if you're self-employed and you move into environment and it's new and you haven't got a whole lot of things set up and you don't have a lot of structures set up. And it can be seriously, seriously challenging for your mental muscle. Okay. If any of you have tried to learn a new task, something totally new, and it requires doing multiple things like driving, you know that you are exhausted. You're exhausted, yeah? So this is kind of like your capacitance, your level of ability to power. So when we have difficult things, it's like this aspect of ourselves where we are like the cardiac muscle. It doesn't cope very well. Okay, so when we've experienced unresolved traumas, we have a script. Now, most of the time, that script might not be needed, but when things get anxious, we get that script. And that script rears its head and it jumps up. And that script is run by a lot of negative voices, negative feelings, negative thoughts, negative images, negative sounds, all sorts of things go in that. So this is what happens when stress kicks in. And we end up really having to battle with the barrage of critical voices that we would keep suppressed, but now are just having free flow because we can't put the anchor on it. Okay, we can't down regulate enough. And this is why they're going wild. So everybody has a critical voice. And I'm not going to talk about it today, except to say that we all have critical voices. And they're formed right from the time of being a terrible two. Okay, they're not formed so much before, but before that, before to maybe sort of 18 months, it's starting. Each child has temperament, but that's just temperament. It's when they're starting to want to be themselves that the critical voice starts to come in, and they start to see the world from the perspective of themselves, and they've got to fit into that world. And that's where they have to manage states in a particular way. And I will talk more about that at another lecture, the masterclass coming up very soon. So these voices in the prosperity tell us that we won't succeed, that we're not good enough, that it wasn't meant to be, we're a failure, we shouldn't have done that, and sit in the regret of things. And the more we see the evidence of us being successful, the more difficult it gets, because we start to feel a little disheartened, disillusioned, and we often then move into a place of cognitive fixing. Cognitive fixing means that we stay and we keep our attention on one thing rather than shifting. So we don't develop the cognitive flexibility. We go into that stress state, we stay in cognitive fixing. And this means that those voices get louder and louder and louder, and we feel worse and worse and worse and worse. And that means we run out of energy, because all of this is very, very energy consuming. So we run out of power. Literally, we run out of power. But the truth is, and this is always the hard bit, the truth is there is an endless, infinite supply that is there for us. I want you to hear that. There is an endless, infinite, I don't know, endless and endless and infinite, they are two separate types of words. Maybe you have separate meanings for each of them, I do, but there's this endless supply, and it's infinite, and it's been there infinitely always. Now, you are not an accident. You were never an accident. Whether your parents or whether anyone thinks that you were conceived as an accident, it's not an accident. It was going to happen because you're here. That's the bottom line, okay? So for thousands of years, there's been this divine plan in place. Well, we can say it's a divine plan, but I'm not sure that we could say it's divine in the sense of there was one person orchestrating it. Life orchestrates itself. Life looks for the right kind of circumstances in order to create and co-create. So that's why life exists in that way. So you came into existence. So it's not a coincidence, but everything has been there in order for you to exist. And if that's the case, I want you to think about this, that you were born, you were and have been, and you were given everything freely. So I want you to just take a nice breath in. Do you pay for air? No. On a nice sunny day in summer, do you pay for the sunshine? No. Even on a cloudy day, you know the sun's still shining. Do you pay for the rain? No. Do you pay for water? No. Do we pay for land? Interesting. Well, we pay for land because man has appropriated it, but the land is free. Nobody owns the land. We've decided we own the land because we want to hold that territory, but we don't own it. It doesn't belong to us. It was given freely to the earth. That's why the earth will last longer than us. Everything was given and has evolved in this life principle so that everything can thrive. And the more we adapt and the more we move with whatever changes are happening, the more we thrive, the freer we become. But it was given with no attachment whatsoever. We create the attachment. We decide, but it never did, never was attached. It was here for us. It's there for us to use if we choose, And also to remember that we are intrinsically part of it. So what do I mean by that? When I say we're intrinsically part of that life principle, well, right at the very, very smallest level of our being, smaller than our molecules, exists stuff that's not even a molecule, not even considered life. It takes a little more than a molecule, well, 4 components to make a molecule that would allow life to exist. You can't say that just some protons is life, because otherwise my cup would have life. A rock would have life, has energy, but it's not got life. So there's something about this infinite law of the infinite supply, and that the infinite supply means that we have the ability to draw it to us. We have the ability to pull it to us because we are the building blocks of it. And money is just what? Something we've created. It's something that's created. Yeah. So the law of infinite supply states that everything is yours to have. Everything is yours to have. There's no limit on the supply. It's infinite. The only limit is the limit of your mind. The vessel, your ability to believe, conceive, and receive. So there's this ability to conceive it, the ability to believe it, and the ability to receive it. Okay. The Trinity, yet again. As I talk, I'm remembering a Trinity. Okay, so what stops the vessel receiving? What stops us conceiving? It's all to do with what we believe to be true. So this is why people who manifest, it fails. Yeah. People that go and say, but I've visualized it. I've done this. I've done that. And it doesn't work. And in fact, yesterday I was having a discussion with someone, and she was basically really talking about a family event. And I said to her at the time, I said, you know, the hardest thing for all of us is to actually truly be able to let go, to be able to do what we need to do and then let go. And my story was, I talked about the deck outside our house, where our neighbors built this huge deck. And we were trying to get planning permission to kind of take the deck down, really. And he was doing everything that he could do to keep his deck up, but it was like another whole big room next to our front door. And what really happened was I had to really work with true congruence about what I believed to be fair. What did I believe to be fair, and what could I truly live with given whatever was going on? And that was what I focused on. I focused on creating peace. I focused on creating peace in my mind so that there was no fear and there was no worry about a future. I was just creating that state of peace and living in that state of peace. So we know that when we are using up lots of energy, we are losing power. When we visualize, we also have to build power. And the way we build power is by doing things more and more and more so that we get more and more and more of those mental pathways growing. And obviously, the more pathways that grow together, neurons that fire together, wire together, they release neurochemicals, and that wires even more till eventually you've got more and more and more of those neurons together that then create a very strong feeling. So we have to begin to start to visualize something so that it is real, so that no doubt can exist. And then we can let it go. But we have to visualize it so that we create the magnetic force around us so that we can magnify things to us. Yeah. So we have to create that magnetic force so that our will that we command can be done. And this is about how do we self-command? We are commanding through the act of intentional conscious actions. And part of intentional conscious actions is repeatedly doing actions where you are quietening the mind, taking it into a state of repair and rest and energizing it. And eventually things will begin to flow in a really wonderful way. So here's another idea of how you can do this and how I've managed to look at things and really make sure that I can draw to me is, for example, the idea of being on a car or a bus and being late and knowing that I need the universe to work for me, to do something for me. And but of course, the universe requires you to do things for yourself too, okay? You can't just visualize and then don't do anything. No. So what I would do is I would often just go, okay, who do I need to contact? Who can I phone? Who can I tell I'm going to be late? Or what can I do? What do I have to accept here right now so that I can be okay? And what I would then have done is done my bit. And then incredibly, that the moment I sit there and I think about it and I've recognized what I've done, I've spoken about it, I've said, yeah, now I've done that, I can let this go. Everything's going to be all right. And I let myself see things going to be okay. I cannot tell you the amount of times that the traffic has just cleared. And this is the secret. We can do whatever it is that we want, but we must pay attention to using the law of infinite supply. It is limitless and it's there for you and it's benevolent. Why would you be given so much only to have it taken away? Never. It's always there, so long as you focus and you pay attention. So I want you to just go away after this live and just question your beliefs about infinite supply. And maybe even think about if, that there's plenty for everyone, that all of life is conspiring to support you, it's working to support you. And also to be aware of your ability to receive. So what kind of thoughts, feelings, actions that sort of come into this ability to receive. And remember, I talked earlier on, right at the very beginning, about not being able to receive, praise for being brave. Okay, so it's about being able to receive information and accept it and acknowledge it and have that. These things are really important. So where is your ability to be able to receive? Where's your ability to be able to believe, conceive, and receive the endless and infinite supply that is yours to have? Yeah. And that's about the start of where you would begin the process of moving towards living in prosperous life, because the moment you start to conceive it and you start to really see it to such a way that it's so deep inside you, and you start to take one step, then everything rushes to help you move forward. And then life's easy. It's not difficult at all. So what would it be like if you could live your life sovereignly in ease and grace, and deeply know that your abundance is yours to have and share? Trust your inner guidance to always show you the way, safely letting go, knowing that all your debts get paid. Sleep well at night, there are no worries or doubts, and take full delight of what life is all about and what it has to offer. If any of this resonates for you and you'd like to find out more about how I can help you, I have 5 Sovereign Way breakthrough calls that are free. And in that call, what we'll do is explore your biggest blocks and how I might help you have greater health, wealth, happiness, and sovereignty in your life. I'll put the links in the comments after this live. And thank you for being with me today.